stunning looks than swift.
Afghanistan on a high after beating one of the 2019 World Cup finalists. Today, they take on the other. It's Afghanistan versus New Zealand in Chennai, and we're here on Maruti Suzuki Arena presents ESPN Cricinfo Match Day. I'm joined today by Deep Dasgupta, who's been with us throughout, and we welcome someone new. Shane Bond, welcome to the show. How are you? Where have you come from?
I've come from home, from New Zealand. Yeah, it's a little bit warmer here in Mumbai, but it's like a second home for me, so it's great to be back.
Yeah, and have you been enjoying the tournament so far?
Yeah, I have. I think the cricket's been excellent, and I think, you know, when you get teams like the Netherlands obviously getting a win yesterday of South Africa, that's a real boost for the tournament. So the cricket's been excellent, and yeah, it's wide open, this one.
Yeah, I guess in the last 3 or 4 days we've seen the two big upsets, Afghanistan beating England, Netherlands beating South Africa. It's opened up the points table a little bit. It's made the top four a bit more uncertain. Let's come to today's fixture. New Zealand, Afghanistan, they've played each other twice. New Zealand have beaten Afghanistan comprehensively both times. Just your opening comments on what we can expect.
From a New Zealand point of view, I think you see a lot of bounces and short balls. I think you saw a little bit of that from England. So, but having been around a couple of games against Afghanistan, you know, that hostility we talk about with Afghanistan to try to put them on the back foot. And then it's just respecting their spin bowlers in particular with Mujib and Rashid, who are their sort of X-factor players. If you can negate that threat, then New Zealand's all-round discipline should be too good.
Yeah, Deep, we spoke extensively last night about the blueprint for so-called smaller teams, bat first and then try and defend. Is that kind of what you think we'll see, that sort of match-up?
I think that's how it should be. If you look at Afghanistan, their strength is their bowling and maybe spin. We haven't seen Dew playing a huge role as of now, so I mean you can take that into the calculation as well. But I think for teams with batting not being strength, bat first, put up a decent total, 270, 280, and then field well and bowl with disciplined lines and stuff. And I think that's the way to go about. I mean, both the so-called upsets we've seen so far, it's been Netherlands, Afghanistan, bat first and defend the total.
Yeah, so that's obviously if they have a choice. Let's just kind of throw the cat among the pigeons and say, what if Afghanistan have to field first? And then what can they do to still have some kind of competitive edge?
I mean, obviously, bowling first, obviously the spinners will get a little more help. You know, during the day, obviously, the pitch would play a little on the slower side. So that kind of also helps their spin attack. But then the key would be their batting, and their batting I still think is the weaker suit. So it boils down to how good, the kind of start they would get, because a lot of it, for me, boils down to Gurbaz giving them a good start, and with Zadran as well, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk lots about Rahmanullah, Gurbaz ball, we've called it now. We've got a new little moniker. But let's start just by looking at the venue. So Chennai, we know, hosted a couple of games, and there's this red soil, black soil situation going on there. Shane, do you think it is still a spinner-friendly venue as we've described it? I mean, you've been around the traps a long time, you know the ground well. Yeah,
from last year's IPL, the previous year, I'm talking 2 years ago, was a very up and down wicket. Last year it was just a good cricket wicket. So New Zealand will just be hoping for a good cricket wicket. They'd be expecting that the spinners will get a little bit of help, but on a good cricket wicket, you'd expect New Zealand to be too good. If there's some help there for the Afghani spinners, then I certainly think it levels things up a little bit.
Yeah, Deep, you on the conditions?
So generally spin does better than pace at this venue, but looking at the last 2 games here in this tournament, one was India-Australia where it turned, but the other game, it didn't. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of a surface we have for this game. But yeah, it would boil down to, because those pitches, it boils down to how much moisture there. If it's dry, it will turn. If it's not, it won't. So I guess we need to just wait and watch how it pans out.
Yeah, we've actually got an interesting stats around what you've described as almost a 50-50 split. So since 2021, it seems that seamers and spinners have taken a similar amount of wickets, 53 for the seamers, 46% for the spinners. There's that graphic up on screen now, 23 versus 20 wickets. Maybe the difference, Shane, in the economy rate, but it's only marginal.
Yeah, the only thing with the economy rate is you generally don't see spinners bowl at the death either, so the paces are obviously going to have that bump up. But what it shows is just a good surface. There's something in it for everyone. New Zealand played Lockie Ferguson here expecting a little bit of pace and bounce, and we saw that. Rashid was the most successful bowler against Afghanistan, so New Zealand still have that option of perhaps Anish Shodhi coming into the team if they feel like that's a weapon that could attack Afghanistan.
Yeah, so we're just waiting on some news from the toss. Before we get there, let's talk about what we know for certain, which is that Kane Williamson will not be playing. I mean, first of all, Shane, we spoke to Mitch a little bit about it, Mitch McClenaghan. It must be just so disheartening. He's come back from that ACL and then it's a freak injury. What do you think is going through his mind?
He'll be annoyed.
Just annoyed,
there's
like
no doubt
mildly
about
annoyed.
that. I think the only thing is he didn't look 100%, so it's going to give him another couple of weeks to strengthen that knee up, which is a good thing. I think you showed from a player who hadn't played any cricket to the way he just walked out and played with he's such a class player. The breaks, I don't think having another couple of weeks off isn't going to affect him too much. I think New Zealand will just be hoping that in 2 weeks' time he'll be fit and be able to participate at the back end of the tournament, because I think psychologically for New Zealand having him in the team, such a great player, makes a huge difference.
How much of a risk do you think it is keeping someone who's got a fresh injury with the squad?
I think New Zealand, when you look at their squad, left one seamer behind, so they only came with 4 seamers with Jimmy Neesham. So they had the extra batting covered because they knew Williamson was obviously going to be a risk. Tom Blundell's coming over as part of the squad as well. I think they just recognise as captain and the best batsman, it's worth the risk holding him. So I think New Zealand have been lucky that their batting lineup has played so well that it's sort of covered that anyway. Yeah,
so you mentioned Kane Williamson as their best batter. Deep, I think you've already kind of covered the juggle they'll have to do now. What should they do? Should Will Young open and we see somebody else at number 3, or how would you juggle
for me
that?
It's straightforward. First 2 games, it worked beautifully. Will Young to open, Rachin at number 3, and yeah, I don't think they really need to reinvent the wheel. It's worked in the first 2 games, not just worked beautifully. Stick with it.
And then in terms of what it may do later down the track in the tournament, I mean, if one of these 3 suddenly has an amazing performance or has a terrible performance?
Listen, kind of watching New Zealand over the years, I don't think they'll make too many changes. They stick with a certain playing 11, they back their players, and they're going to do that even if a couple of them might not have a good tournament or good start to the tournament. I think they're still going to back them, and that's how it should be, because it's a longish tournament. You will have failures on the way. So yeah, I mean, a couple of games here and there shouldn't make a difference.
Yeah, so we'll come back to some of the New Zealand team news and team tactics in a moment. News from the toss we've just got. Afghanistan have won the toss, and Deep, they're not listening to you at all. They've decided that they're going to field first. Why?
Maybe a couple of things. We still don't know how the pitch is going to behave, so maybe it's on the drier side. That's one. Secondly, I'm sure they would have practiced last evening. Maybe there's a dew factor involved there. So yeah, could be those couple of things, but again, ideally speaking, they would have. But if those 2 things are how I think they are, then it's not a bad call.
Shane, what would you say is the only way, I mean, maybe I'm being too extreme, is the main way that a team like Afghanistan can win to bat first, or can they win from this position?
I think that it's almost having 2 bites at the cherry. If they'll feel if New Zealand get 300, they can still have a second option to chase it. As I said, that's that factor of not knowing quite what the pitch is going to do. They'll get a little bit of help. But I think New Zealand, from my point of view, it's sapping heat in Chennai, and they also can now sort of see off Rashid or bat at a different sort of a tempo by batting first, so that's what I'd be expecting to see.
There was somebody saying that Rashid becomes more difficult to face at night. I think that was a bit of the talk as well, so they might be like, oh, well, this is easier now.
Yeah, that was a general consensus when you talk. Obviously, Rashid's such a good bowler. He's the greatest T20 spinner, but when you speak to batsmen, they say that he's just a lot harder to read when the lights are on, seeing the hands, seeing the variations. I suppose that's probably reflected a little bit in his one-day performance as well. So the opportunity to see him under the daytime sky might be a benefit for New Zealand.
Maybe the other thing they might feel a little more confident is Ikram getting those runs, come in late in the order. He batted really well. He got that half-century last game, coming at, 6 if I'm not wrong. Right. So I think now I guess they've got a little more confidence in the depth of the batting as well, with Nabi there, captain himself. So I think they might feel a little more confident with that.
They'd still want a little more from the middle order, wouldn't they?
Oh yes, absolutely yes. I mean, when I still look at that playing 11, at the batting unit, I'm still looking at the top 3. Ramath, Zadran, and then obviously Gurbaz. So yeah, you would want that middle order to fire, surely yes.
Yeah, and that's something that we'll talk about when we come to the team sheets. But let's go back to New Zealand's top 3. Shane, Rachin Ravindra has been a revelation to a lot of us. I mean, I still quite like that story of his name, this amalgamation.
Even I didn't know that.
I mean, if you had to name your kid around the two players you admired the most, what have we got here? I'm really put you on the spot here. You can think about it while you answer the Rachin question. But he's just kind of made a really big impact. He's quite a young man, come in and done all the things that we would expect. You know, I almost think of him like we thought of a Quinton de Kock coming in at this stage. How much do you know about him from back home, and what kind of intel can you give us?
Yeah, it's like a plan coming to fruition. So it was about 2019, I was taking the New Zealand A team on a couple of tours, and Rachin was included in the tour to the UAE with an eye to this tournament, really. So he was an up-and-coming player, hadn't played a first-class game, but they thought they would take him on the trip, give him experience in subcontinent type conditions, and they knew he could bat and bowl with spin bowling. And obviously looking forward to the World Cup in India, New Zealand recognised that that sort of player is going to be important. So there's been a real plan in place for him, and it's just brilliant to see that his development, he's been given opportunities in Bangladesh to play, little bits and snippets with the New Zealand team. He's been selected. It was a brave call really from Gary Stead to pick him, but look at the way he's played. He's 23, super talented. And I think New Zealand would even be surprised at the production that they're getting out of him so far. So, yeah, super lovely kid. And as you say, it's nice to have someone of his skill set coming through, and obviously can play for New Zealand for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, just look at those stats. 15 matches, he's got the 14 wickets. It's the batting average, 37.2, and I believe he also has a first-class average, which is touching 50. So could we see him in the other formats too?
Oh, definitely. I think he's been over and played county cricket, scored a double 100 over there. So he's a multi-formatted player, and New Zealand will be excited that they'll want to get more out of his bowling as well, with the future of playing Test cricket in the subcontinent. Having a top-order batsman who can bowl good left-arm spin is always a real asset for your team.
And the way you describe that sort of transition to the team, to me that's a very New Zealand story. Everything is very well planned. And, it's like what we saw with the Netherlands last night, coming out with their pieces of paper. Can you maybe just tell us a bit about how New Zealand cricket go about planning and developing the structure like that?
Yeah, I think at home, and I've been lucky enough to be part of this, they call it a winter training squad. So at home the weather's so poor in the winter that you have these big marquees and tents. And they have now for 10 years taken the very best young players and put them together in a squad, training over the winter. And I think back to when I first started in sort of 12 years ago, 2010, 2011, it was the Doug Bracewells, the Adam Milnes. These type of players who have all now filtered through the team, and they get them together, work on their fitness. And sort of, we're limited resources, have limited money, but what we do is we get the best out of the players and the conditions that we have. So that, and I think with Mike Hesson, one thing is you've seen with New Zealand is real continuity of selection. So, and that's really benefited in the last couple of World Cups, is now you have a team that's, 30, a lot of players sitting around 30 plus, very experienced, and just bringing in a player like Rachin Ravindra into the team around that. And that's why I think New Zealand's been so successful for the last 8 years, is that continuity of selection and a real experienced, tough, hardcore group of players.
Deep, when you hear that kind of explanation about how a cricketing structure is put together, what bits of it would you take and say other countries could use?
Consistency. I mean, because if you pick a player, if he doesn't fire for 2-3 games, he suddenly is not a bad player. And that's the challenge. I mean, there's two complete extremes. One is New Zealand, the other is India. Because one, obviously, New Zealand, with a smaller talent pool, you've got to be very conscious of it and going to really back your players and try and get the best out of them, which New Zealand has been doing for ages now, doing it beautifully. On the other side, India, huge talent pool, and suddenly one guy, you pick him up and he doesn't fire in 2-3 games because there are 4-5 other guys in that queue. You're like, let's try someone else. And invariably, the guy who's sitting out seems to be a better player than the guy who's actually playing. Always. Like, we've got 3 more other guys, and this guy comes in and he feels again, out you go, we've got another one. So I think that's something which I guess, I mean, even fundamentally so right, is such a right thing to do, is if you back someone, back him, give him enough opportunities, and after that, if you think that it's not working out, then move on. Because at times we can be a little impatient with talent, and that's, I mean, from New Zealand, that's something that we definitely need to learn.
Yeah, I really like the points that you've made there comparing New Zealand and India, and that's going to be a big topic of conversation when that game happens. I'm not allowed to steal the thunder of that pre-show, and let's just go down our own path. So for now, we'll have to take a look at the 11s for this game. We've got the New Zealand team ready to put up for you, and while that comes up, it's just the one change for New Zealand. It's the one that we expected. Shane, anything to note there other than the things we've already mentioned?
No, the only thing I thought they may do is look at Anish Shodhi and perhaps a Jimmy Neesham. You know, as the tournament moves on, if there's a due factor, New Zealand might look at having the fourth seamer option. I mean, Neesham's played in the World Cup finals, a very fine all-round cricketer as well. And perhaps they would have thought that, look, we're just going to hold Ravindra opening the batting and just move everyone up and slide Neesham into that spot. They haven't, and that's a very New Zealand thing to do. Go with the continuity, back the players who have done the job so far, and that's fair enough.
And also no Tim Southee quite yet, and we're going to talk quite a lot about Matt Henry in a little bit, but is Tim Southee going to get a game, do you think?
I wouldn't have thought so, unless New Zealand qualify and want to rest players. I think Matt Henry and Trent Boult have been the opening pair for New Zealand one-day cricket, and they've deserved their spot. Tim, excellent captain, leadership in the background, good backup player, but he doesn't find a place in the starting team, I don't, through the tournament.
Yeah, it sounds strange to hear someone say Tim Southee doesn't find a place in the team. I guess this is time. Hey, let's have a look at Afghanistan now. They beat England, who were one of the 2019 World Cup finalists, and they've decided that they will go with the same 11. So, Deep, that gives Ikram Ali Kil, who you mentioned as being so impressive, another opportunity. What do you hope he'll be able to do today?
Obviously, now that they need to chase, it'll be a different kind of a challenge for a young man just coming out, and depending on how much they need to kind of chase down, if it's a highish score, I mean, that's the challenge for them. Even though they bat kind of deep, you got Azmat there, and obviously after that you've got Rashid as well. But chasing, as we've seen before as well, can be tricky, and especially for teams who don't play a lot of this format, ODIs. You know, it's very tactical how you chase down totals, and if they are like, you know, in the range of 300 odd, it's very tactical and all. And if you haven't had the experience of playing enough ODIs, which unfortunately Afghanistan doesn't, and this team especially that middle order can get tricky.
Yeah, and I just want a word on Fazlul Farooqi, because I think in the first couple of games there was criticism that he went searching for wickets too much, and then he seemed to really pare that back and have good success in the last game.
So Farooqi's had a really good year or so, but Asia Cup he looked off colour, couple of games, but I think he's starting to find his rhythm, and obviously he's trying to get his shape back into it, because he is one of those guys who actually, and Bondi will be able to explain better, who can actually swing the ball both ways. It's not just getting it back into, but actually push it away as well. And maybe trying to do that, or maybe trying to overdo that, kind of lost that rhythm, lost that shape back into the right-hander quite a bit, and just lost that edge. But I think he's starting to focus more on his stock ball, which is trying to get it back into the right-hander rather than push it away. Just depend on the angle to do that for him and not really push it away. So I think he's trying to go back to the basics again.
Yeah, or never a bad thing to actually look at that. And so his challenge up front, Shane, will be Devon Conway. Yeah. You would have done a bit of prep work against him in your time in the IPL. So now we want the cheat sheet.
It's giving me nightmares, Devon.
How do you plan to bowl to a player like him?
Oh, he's such a good player. And I think when you look at his record in the IPL, and you had him and Gaikwad, the challenging thing for any team is that there's good players of pace and spin. Normally you could sort of say, we'll just get through the power play and we can attack a player with spin. He's an outstanding player of spin bowling as well. So you wouldn't say there's any true weaknesses in his game. You know, very strong through the cover region, pulls well. I think the left arm angle coming into the stumps and attacking the stumps early with Farooqi is a key one. It's just him finding that right length with perhaps the mid-on and mid-off a little bit deeper to allow him to hit the stumps. That's probably the best opportunity there.
And you don't think that Kane Williamson being out of the side has put a little bit more expectation on him, or do you think he's just playing the way he always plays?
I think that's the beauty of when you watch Conway play, just bats to his own tempo. He's almost oblivious to everything that goes around him. And then he's sort of got the exuberance of youth at the other end with Young and Ravindra just to go out and play. So I don't think Conway's too phased about what's happening with Williamson. You saw in the first game, even not being there, he's such a great player. So I think a lot of New Zealand's success will be built around him. If he can continue to score consistent runs through the tournament, it allows that New Zealand middle order to come in and do what they've done, and that's score quickly and accelerate at the back end to win games.
Yeah, Deep, any sort of last comments from you on Conway before we move on to the New Zealand attack?
Conway, I think very rarely you find an opener who's better against spin than pace.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
You know, so also the range of shots that he's got, he's absolutely brilliant, whether it's sweeps or reverse sweeps and stuff like that. And also his hunger to score runs. I mean, I've been hearing about him before he actually played for New Zealand, the amount of runs he scored in domestic cricket in New Zealand, before that in South Africa, and then in international cricket. That's insatiable hunger to just keep scoring. And also, I mean, I believe you look at his conversion rate. That's brilliant as well. Because he's not happy just scoring 50, 60. He just wants to just bat. And it's very old school where you just want to bat. Like Bondi said, he's oblivious to what's happening around him. He just wants to bat, and he bats at a good tempo as well. So yeah, he's going to be the key, and especially in this match against the spinners. I think he's going to be an absolute key. So
Afghanistan have got their work cut out for them with the ball, and then they also have their work cut out with them with the bat. I want to move to a conversation around Matt Henry now. Shane, I think he's just had such an impressive 2023. What have you seen in him that's made that transition from sort of someone we used to kind of know to this exceptional bowler?
I think he's flown under the radar because Trent Bolt's so good. You look at Bolt, he put up 200 wickets the other day in 107 games. But if you look at Matt Henry's record, he sits in around one of the best wicket-taking bowlers with the new ball and has done for 4 or 5 years. It's just that his bowling buddy at the other end is almost a level above. But as a combination, that's why New Zealand have been so good at one-day cricket, because they've got 2 bowlers who knock the top off teams. And you can see there Matt Henry and Siraj has obviously had a great year. Mitchell Stark's generally been seen as the best opening bowler in terms of wickets. But that Bolt-Henry combination is a real key for New Zealand's success. And wherever he's gone in the world, whether it be county cricket, playing at home, he's had success in this format. One thing he has been done and used as is more like a Sean Pollock role, where they've bowled his overs out before the final sort of 6, 7, never really seen as a death bowler. Whereas this year in Vitality Blast, he bowled at the death, was fantastic, and he's sort of not reinventing himself, but he's upskilling himself at an age where he's coming back into the fray as a potential death bowler, and that's probably why the wickets column is going to continue to go up as well for him.
And he's also a really good bowler in the first 10 overs, so we've got some numbers around his power play, what he can do in the power play. He's taken 24 wickets at an average of 19 there. What is the reason for that kind of success?
I think he complements Trent Bolt. Trent Bolt's a swing bowler, Matt Henry's a seam bowler, but what he does, he just finds that immaculate top of the stumps length consistently, and it just nibbles either way. So he's always asking batsmen to make decisions, and he just doesn't miss very often. And not only is he taking wickets, his economy rate's low as well. So that Bolt-Henry combination, they complement each other so well. And again, that Afghanistan have to survive that if they're going to have any chance in the game.
Yeah, Dale Steyn actually picked Trent Bolt to be the leading wicket taker of this tournament. I'm wondering if you think Matt Henry might be there.
I picked Matt Henry.
Oh, you picked Matt Henry. Okay.
So I'm looking good so far.
Good choice. Good choice. Okay, you did the right thing there. And then tell us a little bit about him as a guy. I mean, we've got this idea of fast bowlers, as we know, with even a Dale Steyn being mean on the field and then quite chilled off it.
Yep, no, the creature, as they call him.
That's a mean nickname.
It is a mean nickname, isn't it? Had back surgery young, at 23 years, the same surgery I had. So he was obviously touted as a super talented bowler, but had early career injuries. Since really that operation, it's been onward and upward. So he didn't make the World Cup squad in 2015. He got called in and played the semi-final and final, and has really just kicked on from there. So the loveliest guy, very chilled, very competitive, but it's a quiet, competitive nature Matt's got.
It's a typical New Zealander, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Understated.
Yeah. I'm just interested in that back surgery and what that may have done in terms of impacting his action, if it did at all, or what that may have changed about the way he actually bowls.
No, he's bowled the same way, really. I mean, there's been a number of players now in recent time. Booms has had the back surgery. Jofra Archer's gone through it. And all the players who have had it have sort of come out and haven't had reoccurring back injury. So I suppose in some respects for Matt, having had it at a very young age, it's enabled him now to his career to continue to elevate. He's part of the New Zealand Test team. The only format he hasn't really cracked is the T20 format. So, yeah, I mean, as I said, he's worked hard, and he's one of those guys. And there's a number of those players in the New Zealand team, the likes of Daryl Mitchell, have had to bide their time to get into the team, and once they've got in, they've sort of made every post a winner.
And where do you see his career going from here in terms of longevity and maybe some goals to tick off?
Oh, look, I think winning the World Cup for this group is a massive one. You look at Matt Henry now, early 30s, and New Zealand are going to go through a transition phase soon. When you look at Southey, Bolt, Williamson, Henry, they're at that where they're going to lose an era of great players, and the likes of Ravindra, Kyle Jamieson are going to have to come in and pick up those leadership roles. So, I mean, New Zealand, we've had the golden age of New Zealand cricket sort of over the last 8-9 years. It's been unbelievable.
It's a long golden age.
It's a long golden age, and yet long may it continue, but Yeah, I think all the guys, they're still hungry, they're still very, very fit, and they'll want to play as long as they can. And where it used to be in our day, Deep, with 33 was getting, players are playing 37, 38, so who knows, they're in good
Roelof
condition.
van der Merwe, 38. Eh? We spoke about him
Still
yesterday.
dominating, yeah.
Deep, just to kind of round off on Matt Henry, anything you've seen that the opposition batters should be really wary of as he kind of grows into the tournament?
Importantly, when you look at that list, you've got, I think Hazelwood and Matt Henry are very similar in nature. They hit those test lengths, get more movement off the surface than in the air, and so is Siraj. And if you see that success is because the line and length, which is very test-like-ish, that they bowl even with the white ball. So I think that's the key for bowlers like them. And as a batter, you've got to kind of think like that as well, because that's the area, and that's where you will be challenged. That corridor outside off stump, good hard length, and obviously movement of the pitch as well. So as a batter, you've got to be aware of that. And it's so good to see in white ball cricket those three names, because obviously we've found so much of success in test match cricket as well. Stark obviously is a different kind of bowler, so I'm not going to compare. But apart from that, all three of them very similar, very test ball, test length and line kind of bowlers.
Yeah, now that you've seen all the attacks twice, 3 times perhaps, depending on how many games you've kept an eye on, are New Zealand sort of there and thereabouts with the best in the tournament, would you say?
Yes, absolutely yes.
If not the best. If you feel like saying
and
that.
on obviously start of the tournament, there were talks of this might not be, almost the same team like 2019, but might not be at their peak. They're like 4 years down the line. But, that the best thing about New Zealand cricket is they do their basics so right. And I was talking to someone else, I can't remember New Zealand being on the receiving end of any upsets in World Cup.
Oh gosh, this could be famous last words.
Mate, why would you say that?
Yeah.
Listen, but again, Afghanistan, if it turns, would you call it an upset? I don't think I'm going to call it an upset.
Let's talk to him after the show and see what's going on
No,
here.
but the point I'm trying to make is because they do the basics so right, they just put their head down and say, what is my job? Let's do this and see what happens. When we talk about processes and following processes, I think no team in world cricket does it better than New Zealand.
Yeah, so news coming in from the ground that the pitch report has been, well, the person doing the pitch report, not the pitch report,
I think
has been
was doing the pitch
report as an absolute belter with lots of runs and not much grass on it. How do you think that will affect everything we've spoken about so far?
I think New Zealand will just play. I think that's what Deep will talk about. They know the roles that they have within the team. They'll respect Afghanistan. They'll know they don't want to get too far ahead of themselves. They know this is a game they're probably expected to win, and they'll know if they win 4 out of 4, they're probably 2 games away from a semi-final. They just have to be respectful and just continue to do that disciplined cricket, because if they do that on a good surface, they should be too good.
The one aspect of New Zealand's attack we haven't discussed yet is Mitchell Santner. He seems to be having a better year now. How's he looking ahead of this game?
He's just a brilliant bowler. I think, you look at Mitch Santner sometimes ago, he hasn't got the volume of wickets. You have to remember he plays most of his cricket in New Zealand on very small grounds on wickets that don't turn, and he goes at sort of 4.5 and over. As soon as he gets a little bit of help, he's deadly. He's an outstanding bowler. I think, I've obviously got Bolt, Henry, Ferguson with the pace, but Santner's the key cog in the wheel. And you talk to the seamers, they understand, even when he's not getting wickets, the importance that he has by giving New Zealand the control in the middle order, and that's what he's done. And with a little bit of help in the wicket, he then becomes that wicket-taking bowler as well.
And it helps that he knows the venue.
Oh yes. So the same thing with Dan as well, and now with Santner. So in New Zealand, it's not going to turn. So you depend a lot on the right seam position, on bounce and line and length and that discipline. And now add all the experience that he's got playing here in India, and add that bit of experience, and he looks like a different bowler altogether. Especially the first 2 games. He was absolutely brilliant, especially against England, that first game. Wow.
Yeah, he's a
So
great
let's
bowler.
turn to Afghanistan's spinners now, kind of just the matchup there in terms of, we've talked about Santner. Let's talk about the 3 of them. I think we spoke a lot about Rashid Khan today and in previous games, and also Mujib, but how about Mohammad Nabi?
He's the dangerous one today with New Zealand. Obviously with a lot of left-handed batsmen, if he gets some assistance, it's going to be hard. Mujib generally to the lefties is going to slide into the stumps from around the wicket, so he'll present opportunities to sweep, play up the pads, but Nabi, if he gets that hold, New Zealand will be very wary of that. And they'll be talking about Rashid Khan, and if Rashid gets no wickets for 45, we're going to score 300. They're the sort of conversations they'll be having. So look, he's a super experienced campaigner, played a lot of cricket over here. Generally doesn't look to turn the ball in T20 cricket, but I'm sure that he'll be looking to spin the ball against New Zealand here today.
Those are those numbers that you mentioned against the left-hand batters. So in the last 4 years, 13 wickets, an average of 19.6. That's a really decent average, and economy of 4, as we see New Zealand singing their anthem. Shane, this has got nothing to do with the game, but I must say, if you had to choose between the New Zealand anthem and the South African one, which do you think has a nicer ring to it? Because they both use all the languages.
Yeah, I do. I do like the fact that they blend the languages together. So yeah, it is cool. I said recognising all the cultures in the country.
You're not choosing one, though.
I'm not choosing New Zealand. I'm choosing New Zealand. You know that.
Deep should be the neutral observer there. Actually.
I'm not getting into this.
Deepa, the conversation just around the pitch then is that maybe the wrist spinners will have some advantage today.
Yeah.
Afghanistan haven't picked the one that they've got on the bench, Noor Ahmed, a young man who's had a little bit of experience. Do you think that's just obviously a successful combination, but will we see him at some point?
It's difficult. I think at times, and especially with the new ODI rules with only 4 fielders, it's very difficult, and especially on good batting pitches. That's the reason you see a lot of teams going in with 4 seamers. So they have an extra seamer to bowl in those, in between overs, the second power play. But obviously they've got quality, but I don't see them picking more than 3 spinners. I think 3 is absolute max. You've got to have 3 seamers, if not 4. I'm not a big fan of that rule, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Same on your side.
Yeah, exactly. That's the extra fielder in makes a massive difference, a huge difference. Yeah, I really respect Noor Ahmed as a bowler because he's one of those bowlers who can, take a whole lot of wickets and turn a game. I think Afghanistan are just missing that sort of seam bowler all-rounder in the middle there. New Zealand they've got theirs on the bench, and Mitch Santner's sort of filling that all-rounder spot. Yeah,
not too many ODIs to Noor Ahmed's name, just the 3 there with 2 wickets, 18 wickets in 11 List A games. But look at those IPL stats, 16 wickets in 13, and I suppose, 7.8 is also the IPL.
In a T20 game. But he's quality, there's no two ways about it. It's unfortunately, with those rules and everything else, it's be very difficult to get in more than 3 spinners. And also Noor, he's a proper number 10 batter. It's not that he can bat in 6 or something and add as a batter, so it becomes difficult then.
Okay, so those are the 2 11s we've got. It's prediction time. I must say the last 2 games I've been on are the ones that the predictions have just gone up in smoke. So think very, very carefully before you make your prediction. Afghanistan fielding first. Shane, what would you like New Zealand to score?
I think anything over 280 will be challenging for them. Yeah, I think New Zealand. The rest.
This is a conservative prediction.
It is. I think the thing is you don't want to go out thinking you're going to score 300, 330s. Sorry, but if you just say, look, New Zealand will say, look, if we get through the new ball, play the spin as well, the result will take care of itself. So they won't get too far ahead of themselves.
Deep on your side.
I'm going to go with the other as well, 280, and then assess after 20-25
now you've gone
overs.
with the same prediction.
You're a smart guy.
Yeah, listen, that's how
say something ridiculous.
Ridiculous, okay. Then let me go on and say, okay, 320.
That's hardly ridiculous. I'm waiting for
what do you want me to say, 400 or something?
Or 400. Or, we've had all kinds of things turn up very differently.
But having said that, the other thing quickly is how good has been the captaincy. We know Kane Williamson is very good, but Tom Latham, especially when I look at that first game against England, I was like, oh, come on, you're going in with 3 bowlers actually, and then you have, Jimmy Neesham and the all-rounders. You're looking at it, it's like, no, you're definitely a bowler shot, but the way he handled the bowlers was absolutely brilliant. I think that was a masterclass in captaincy and how can manage bowlers, and obviously the bowlers did a job. There's no 2 ways, but I think was absolutely brilliant. So yeah, that's again a very, very big factor in that Kiwi side.
Actually, Mitch was talking about whether this is Kane Williamson's New Zealand or Tom Latham's New Zealand. I'd be interested in your views on that before we wrap.
I think it's still Kane's, but I think now that he's out, Tom has to make his own mark on. And for a New Zealand captain, usually it's always 4 seamers and a spinner, and then part-time seamers. Here it's very different. It's the 3 seamers, and he's juggling all these spin bowling resources, which is a rarity. But the way he's doing it, very, very good so far.
And he would have had a lot of conversation with Kane around it.
Yeah, and he's captained domestic cricket a lot. Kane's missed tours, Latham's come and had, so it's almost the planning in the back, the planning in the background that going in just in case something happens has helped New Zealand because they've had a seamless transition with Latham taking over.
Yeah, so New Zealand, a side that always does their homework. We see Will Young and Devon Conway getting ready to open up against Afghanistan. You can follow all the action on the match on the ESPN Cricinfo app, which you can download and get all your news, views, scores and analysis. There'll be plenty coming through this match and through the World Cup. Thanks to Deep Dasgupta and Shane Bond. And don't forget to join us here on Maruti Suzuki Arena presents ESPN Cricinfo Matchday for the halftime show.
Stunning looks